see if we're live here. If we're live here, if we got good sound, somebody tell me something. Somebody give me a thumbs up if we can hear me okay. Alright, I got a thumbs up. Cool. Cool, we'll let it load up here. We're a little bit early. We're a few minutes early. I see some folks starting to load up there. Hey, Danny. Sound okay, man? Sounds good. Cool. Man, this is really cool. What cool technology we have here that I can sit here at my farm in Bentonville, Arkansas and talk live to everybody. That is really, really cool. So we'll let a few folks load up, and then we'll try to get started right at 7 o'clock. Hopefully we won't hear too many cows mewing or horses neighing or my son running by in the background. We may get a little bit of that here in a little bit. So this is really cool. What's your go-to and backup? I missed it. Good evening from Nixon, Missouri. Hey, Dave. Man, awesome. Ready for some Q&A. Thought I had a question there. I'm going to see if I can get back to it. What's my safety net? Danny's asking me what's my safety. Before we get started here, I'll answer a few questions. What's my safety net bait? You know, probably Strike King Rage Bug. That's kind of been my go-to bait when I've got to have a bite lately. It's been a Strike King Rage Bug, so that's probably it. It's probably a go-to when I've got to have one. That's it. So that's awesome. Favorite lake to fish, Lindsay? That's pretty easy for me. 2014, I finished second at Lake Okeechobee, and been kind of special to me. Okeechobee it's an awesome place. It's such a cool, nostalgic place to fish. That's definitely my favorite one. Hey Dick, man, glad to be here tonight. It's such a cool honor to be here. Go-to bait on the bed. Hey Dustin, that's a rage bug. I just mentioned a rage bug. You know, normally when I'm bed fishing, I'll try to have a white Strike King Rage Bug on. You know, it's got a lot of appendages. It's got legs. It kicks a lot, so you can work the fish and irritate it. And so that's my go-to one on the bed. If I see the bed way out there in front of me, I like to take a wacky rig Strike King Ocho and throw up there. But a Rage Bug, once I see the fish, that's what it is. Hey Dick, Sam Rayburn. Dick asked, what's my thoughts on Toledo Bend and Sam Rayburn? I like both of them. I haven't been on Toledo Bend as much. Rayburn we've been to several times. I actually opened the season up there at Rayburn this year. I had 21 pounds the first day, so I liked it pretty good this year. Ended up finishing 21st there, so it was a fun event. Best way to fish a large pond or small from the bank? You know, I just shot a little off-the-cuff video of that at my mom's pond, and we were throwing a Strike King Mini King spinnerbait. That is a fish-catching dude. So if I'm going to a small pond right now, I'm throwing a Mini King spinnerbait. Just downsize your baits when you go to a pond, especially if it's a smaller one. My son really likes that bait. That and the Mini King buzz bait. Those are some pretty cool little baits. So, hey Dave, just a rising water conditions. You know, I'm going to talk about some rising water conditions here in just a little bit, but the fish will move with it just about. I remember having a tournament one time of rising water conditions. The bushes were not in the water in the morning, and I caught them late in the afternoon in those bushes. So my thought on rising water condition is first to go with the fish. The fish are going to go with it. A portion of them will. Some of them will hold back on that old bank line, and so once it's been in the bushes for a few hours, or once it rises for a few hours, I want to move with them. Any tips for fishing Chickamauga? A new homeowner here. Hey, Lindsay. We know we're going to Chickamauga. We're going to open the season back up with these new super tournaments with MLF and FLW. We're going to open them back up at Chickamauga. So I'm not going to give any secrets of Chickamauga right now. So I'm looking forward to being there. Brady, how can my wife catch bigger fish? You know, I don't know. I just think you got to keep going over and over and over to try to catch bigger fish. My frog rod for fishing. I throw a Lew's Custom Pro Magnum hammer rod. You got to have something. It kind of depends. If you're open water frogging, I may throw a Mag Bass 1 rod, but but I like that Magnum hammer. Have I ever fished cur? Donnie, I've never fished cur Bugs Island. I never have, so I can't say much about it. I've heard it's a good lake though. So, hey, we'll do some more questions at the end. I'll go ahead and get started. Hey, first of all, man, I'm honored to be on the Fishers of Men site. What a cool honor. When you look back at a lot of the guys that's been on the site, Alton Jones, Ott Defoe, Mark Rose, a little bit of everybody, Edwin Evers. We've had such an awesome group on here, and I'm just honored to be part of that. I'm going to tell a story tonight about how I met Al Odom. That's going to be my fishing story tonight. Randy was talking about. He told a story. I encourage everybody to go back and watch these professions. If you haven't seen them, they're all on the site. I've been back and watched all of them, and man, what some cool story. Everybody has a little bit different take on things, but man, everybody has a heart of gold, and you can learn something from everybody. And I'm not going to talk about winning the classic like Randy did, but I am going to talk about meeting Al Odom several years ago, and I'm going to tell a story about that and some of the things I learned from that. Al's such a cool guy, and I know I believe he started Fishers of Men, and I first met Al probably back in 2007 or 2008. I think it was my rookie season on the FLW tour, and we were at Lake Eufaula. And this is my fishing story. We were at Eufaula, and the water was, I got a tea glass here. The water was it was 10 times muddier than that. It was super muddy. It was like coffee and chocolate milk muddy. And I was throwing a spinnerbait. I had what I had always done in that muddy water. I had a big bright chartreuse and white spinnerbait with chartreuse and white blades, and we were going down the bank. We were fishing those grass beds there at Eufaula, and I was not getting bit at all. And Al, who was my partner, he was my co-angler at the time. I remember throwing my spinnerbait through this little grass patch that's probably 4 or 5 feet wide. Threw the spinnerbait through it. As my spinnerbait came through it, nothing. And I went right through the center of it. As I went on past it, I watched Al. He had a black vibrating jig on, and I had never thrown a vibrating jig in my life. Al comes through that grass bed, and I watched about a 6-pounder erupt on that vibrating jig, and I had to get it in the net. And Al and I sat there and kind of admired it for a minute and like, wow. Like a light bulb went off for both of us. And I'm like, hey, Al, you got any more of those vibrating jigs back there? Because I didn't even have one with me. They were kind of new to me, and so he loaned me a vibrating jig. I tied it on. I said, hey, man, let's tie it on braid. I got some extra braid here. We both spooled up braid. We both had like 18 pounds that day. I don't remember the exact weight. It was just 17 or 18 pounds. We both had a great event. I think I went on to finish 20-something. And so it was such a cool thing for me because I caught something on a new bait I'd never thrown before, and those fish wanted something different than just that spinnerbait going through there. And so the next year I went back to Eufaula, and I caught 17 pounds again out of those same exact grass beds where Al and I caught them. So that was pretty cool, and I learned a lot that day, and I learned a lot from Al that day, and that's one of my fishing tips that I always talk about is I think you have to have an open mind when we're out there fishing. You really have to have an open mind. I was dead set I was going to catch those fish on a spinnerbait that day, and for some reason they wanted that vibrating jig. I think the water was so muddy that the vibrating jig created more vibration in the water, and they wanted that. So having an open mind, I was able to change, and we both had good events. And so if I can give you some advice, that's one thing is always have an open mind. And two, always be learning. And I think you can learn, from anybody. I think you can learn from, even though I was a pro in the boat and Al was my co-angler, I learned a lot from him that day, and I think we both learned. I don't think I think after that we talked about neither one of us had ever caught a fish on a vibrating jig, and bam, we both learned something there. So keep an open mind, and learn from everybody. You can learn from, if you're going fishing with just about anybody, you can pick up a tip from them. So I always try to keep an open mind and try to learn from. You can pick up something every time you go fishing, and so you got to try to always be learning, and you've always got to be a student of the game. I've heard Mark Rose talk about that a lot. If we ever stop learning, we're in trouble. So we got to continue to be a student of the game. We got to continue to try to stay, cutting edge and try all those new baits. I mean, I love to get a new bait in my hand and go out there in the water, go out here to Beaver Lake or these Bella Vista lakes, and always try to be a student of the game and always try to keep learning. I'll try to not answer some of the questions. It's going to throw me off here a little bit. But Lindsay said, "What's my favorite go-to snack in the boat?" By far, that's a Pringles. I love my new favorite Pringles is cheeseburger Pringles. And so if you haven't tried cheeseburger Pringles, man, you guys got to give those a try. So I've always got some cheeseburger with me right now. My next tip, if you keep an open mind and you continue to learn, you can learn from people. You're always learning how to generate more bites. And so if we're generating more bites, we're starting to develop game plans. And that's a big thing when you go to a new lake. I always try to have some type of game plan laid out when I get there. And as you make adjustments during practice and you make changes during practice, you start building that game plan for the tournament. I grew up being a sports guy, and so game plans have always been big for me. I played college football at Arkansas Tech and played college baseball there, and so we always had a game plan going into every game. And so when I think about plans, it kind of reminds me of Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, so you may have hope and a future. For I know plans that I have for you, says the Lord. He has a plan for each and every one of us out there. And he had a plan for me to be right here tonight talking to you guys. And if you'd have told me years ago that I would be, talking to people about my faith or going around fishing and speaking at churches and everything, I would have told you, man, people are just crazy. But God has a plan for each and every one of us, and He had a plan, for me to be right here tonight. I wasn't one of those people. You hear stories of people have to kind of hit rock bottom to find the Lord. And that wasn't the story for me. Fortunately, I had a mother that took me to church when I was a young boy. I grew up right here in Northwest Arkansas, and grew up on a farm here, and we went to a little Church of Christ here in Elm Springs, Arkansas, and just about every time the doors were open when I was a kid, we were in church, and we went, really, really steady until I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, and we moved farms, and we had to, we kind of drifted away from church, and I went from going to church all the time, and not really ever fully accepting the Lord, to not really going to church at all, and so we kind of drifted away. We moved farms, and I went on through high school and college, and and I was always a pretty good kid growing up. My dad, who we lost a couple of months ago, his name was Kenny, and he wore a belt that said Kenny on the back of it, and so he made sure that I was always a pretty good kid. They said he used to have the fastest belt in the West. He could grab you by one hand, grab the belt in the other, and wear you out with it if you got out of line. So I was always a pretty good kid, so I didn't get in too much trouble growing up. But I went on to high school and to college, and I got an ag business degree. Like I said, I played football and baseball there at Arkansas Tech, and where Lake Dardanelle's at. So I always liked going to Lake Dardanelle. But I got out of school, and I kind of drifted along. I always knew, thinking back to when my mom took me to church as a young boy, I always had something a little bit missing in my life, and so. But I got out of college, and like I said, I got an ag business degree, and I went to work for a company called Tyson Foods, and there I worked my way up, and I was a plant manager for them the last 6 years I worked there. But right there at Tyson Foods is where I met a man that made a huge impact on my life. Huge impact on my life. His name was Danny Williams, and Danny worked for USDA, and I was the plant manager there, or assistant plant manager at the time when I met Danny. And he always used to come up the hallway, and he worked for USDA, and I worked for management. We really weren't supposed to converse too much, but he loved to hunt and fish, and I did too. And he used to come up into my office and have lunch with me, and Danny'd always sit down and have lunch, and we'd always talk. And then one day, after being really, getting to be pretty good friends, he said, "Hey, man, I'd like for you to go to church with me. I'm a pastor at Sonora Baptist Church." And I was kind of taken back from it first, and I said, I don't know, Danny, I don't know if I want to go back to church, I've been in church before, and I've seen how people act that say they're Christians. I'm just not sure. I just wasn't sure. And Danny said, "Hey, no problem, no problem." He just kept being good friends with me, and just kept loving on me as a friend, and never really shoved anything down my throat. And but he planted that seed and really got me to thinking. And a few months went by, and he invited me again to go to church with him. And he said, "Man, I'm preaching on something this weekend." I said, I don't know, Danny. I don't know if I want to go yet." But shortly after that, we had to attend a funeral of a 17-year-old boy, of someone that worked for the plant there, one of the grandkids. And I went with Danny to that funeral, and I remember sitting there as we were sitting there at that funeral and looking at that that young man in that funeral, and I just realized that right then I really started thinking about life is finite. We're not here forever. And I remember going back home after that night, and I was sitting on my deck on Beaver Lake, and that funeral really got me to thinking about how finite things are. And then it got me to thinking about how did we all get here? I mean, how in the world did we get here? And I encourage you to think about some of this. I remember sitting there on my deck that night looking out at Beaver Lake. I lived on Beaver Lake at the time, and just thinking about how this lake get here, how did all these trees get here, and our bodies work the way they do, and I encourage you to do that. If when you're sitting in a tree stand and you watch the light, you watch the sun come up, and you watch it get daylight, and you look at all that around you. Or if you're on the lake and you're idling out through there, you think, man, how did all this get here? And that night I realized, hey, it only got there one way. God tells us how it got here. He put it all here. And so I remember calling Danny on the phone that night and say, "Hey, man, I do want to go to church with you. I do want to invite Christ to come into my life." And he said, "Man, I'll be right there." And so he said he prayed about 45 minutes on the way to my house, and we sat right there in my living room floor at Beaver Lake, and I invited Christ to come into my life. And man, I remember stepping up off the floor and thinking, gosh, what a feeling. It was just unbelievable the way that the Holy Spirit came over me, and unbelievable how it felt. And God really changed my path from there. I went from being a plant manager with a big corporation to I was able to fish full time, and that was always my dream. He's really blessed me unbelievably with an awesome wife since then, and my son who's 11, and just continues to bless my life. And I wear Proverbs 3:6 on the back of my jersey. Acknowledge Him in all your ways, and He will direct your path. And I really feel like when I acknowledged Him, He made my life made a right turn or a left turn. It was amazing the difference when I accepted Him and where He's taken me over the last 13 years. I've been able to fish full time the last 13 years, and it's just been awesome. But one thing it does, it gives. I told you I was a sports guy. One thing it does, when we accept Christ, it doesn't mean life is always easy. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have trouble. But it gives us, this right here gives us a game plan for life. It tells us how to treat our wife. It tells us how to raise our kids, how to spend our money. And so I can't imagine going through life and not having that game plan. And so if you're going through life right now with something and you don't have a plan for your life, it's just amazing when you accept God where He might take you. But it gives you that game plan for life. And I got to thinking about that. And if you're a Christian, you have that strong foundation for your life. And going through this coronavirus right now, and the loss of my dad a couple months ago. I can't really imagine going through all that without having Christ in my life. We've always got somewhere to turn, and we've always got that plan in front of us when we become a Christian. And I just can't imagine. I know some people going through, we're going through this COVID thing right now, and I know a lot of people that are really struggling with it. And the folks that are Christians and believe, their outlook on this is totally different when I talk to somebody about it. So it's awesome. So if I can leave you with anything, game plan for life. I think I think when we become Christians, we've got an instant roadmap and an instant game plan for what we need to do with our life. So that's kind of my testimony. I'd love to have some questions. I see Mike Kopech's on there, man. Mike and I go back a long ways, man. He's a strong Christian, and it's good to see Mike on here. And he's from right up here in Northwest Arkansas. If you guys got any fishing questions, I would entertain the thought of asking about or answering anybody any fishing questions that we've got. So, one thing. If we don't get some questions here, I will. I got a heart there. I like the heart. I will. I kind of have. I don't have it written down here, but I've kind of got 4 or 5 lessons or 4 or 5 ways that I approach tournament bass fishing. How often does my family get to travel with me? They get to go, Lindsay. They get to go. They get to go about 3 or 4 trips out of the year. My wife is a CRNA or a nurse anesthetist, and so she has some vacation time, and so it's always special when they get to go with me. They don't get to go as much as they used to before Brock started school. They went quite a bit with me, but I seem like I always fish better when I'm always more relaxed when they're there. So I really enjoy them getting to go with me. So if I didn't mention my wife and I, we've been married 18 years. My son Brock is 12. So we've been doing this a little while. His whole life I've been a fisherman. So what's my favorite way to fish and my favorite bait? John, my favorite way to fish is something fast. Normally I want to fish, extremely fast, whether that be a spinnerbait, a buzzbait, a crankbait. And so normally that's my favorite way. And favorite bait, really, I don't really have a favorite bait, but I do like to turn that handle on that lose reel just about as fast as I can. Danny asks, how does your faith impact you as a competitor? It just when I lay my head on my pillow at night, I just try to leave everything on the water and everything up to God, and I know He's got a plan, and sometimes I'm going to catch him, sometimes I'm not, but I try to be the same no matter what. See, Brady, what's the biggest largemouth you've ever caught? What lake did you catch it on? The biggest largemouth, Brady, is a 9.6 at Pickwick Lake. I caught it on a big swim bait one time. Chuck Taylor asked, thank you for your message. Lake Havasu, Arizona. I've never fished Havasu, Chuck, so Dick, congrats on your marriage. God blessings with the great partners. Yeah, thank you, Dick. I appreciate it. My wife always says she's my biggest supporter when I'm doing my bad and my biggest fan when I'm doing good. And she really gets it. She's the one that pushed me to do it. She said when you get into this, no matter what you do, give it at least 3 years. And that was 13 or 14 years ago. So she's been really awesome. What's my hook set? Well, if you'll Google my name, I've got a pretty good hook set of a fish that hit a topwater at Okeechobee a few years ago, and it got lots of views. So I have to work on not setting the hook as hard. That's my biggest problem, is setting the hook too hard normally. So good question. I'm gonna run through one more thing here, and before we get some more questions. But I've kind of got. Hello, when is it time to go? I don't quite follow that, Joseph. One of my things when I'm approaching a tournament, I kind of got 3 or 4 rules that I always try to. Lindsay, I have a Bible app. Lindsay asked if I have a go-to. I have a Bible app that pops up every morning, and I try to. She asked about a devotional. I try to do a devotional every morning on that app. That helps me. That really helps me kind of stay on track. And we speak with a group of guys on the road called Meet the Pros. We have church on the road, and so that really helps me stay connected. Mike Kopech, when's Brock done with school? I think he's done any day, Mike. So. He's looking forward to being done. Everything's online right now. But I'm going to run through one real quick thing on tournament fishing. It's kind of my tournament strategies. I still fish a 5-fish limit tournament, and so my number one rule when I go to tournament bass fishing in a tournament is never underestimate the power of a limit. I always try to start wherever that I can catch 5 fish the quickest. Mark Rose and I used to always joke quite a bit about, hey, what's the number one rule in bass fishing? He's, wherever we can catch the limit the quickest. It seems like every time you catch a limit, everything gets a little bit easier, everything gets a little more relaxed. And so that's my number one rule in tournament bass fishing. Number two is try to catch those fish today. Use your practice as a tool, not as a crutch. Too many times we get all fired up for practice. We're catching them really good at practice, and then we get in the tournament and they're not biting the same. And so number two is try to catch them today, what they're doing today, and not worry too much about how you did in practice. In fact, some of the best fishermen in the world say they throw practice out the window most of the time. So that's number two. And number three is when you get to struggling during the day, or if you're not being able to catch something, always fall back on your strength. One of my strengths is fishing fast, and so when I get to struggling catching fish out there, I always fall back on my strength. I'll pick up a spinnerbait, a buzzbait, a crankbait. Covering water is one of my strengths, and so that would be number three, is always fish your strength when things get tough. So I got another question. What is one mistake that you've made fishing that has helped you shape the way you fish today? Probably talking about practice. I used to put too much stock in practice, and I wouldn't go to new areas during the tournament. And so I've learned in the last few years, it's like I've been a little more consistent in the last few years of letting the day evolve, not worry too much about practice, and figure out what they're doing right now. And don't be scared to change. I used to, if I hadn't caught a fish in an area in practice, I wouldn't go there in the tournament, and I've totally changed that the last few years. What's my approach to a tidal fisheries? Well, Andy, not very good. I fished the Potomac a few times, and I don't have a real good answer for that. I haven't done real well in the tidal water. That's probably, of all my game, definitely tidal waters is my weakest. When I had one good event on the Potomac River. I think I had a top 25 or something. I found one area and I stuck with it the whole time. I fished it through the high tide, fished it through the low tide, and so if I had to give you some advice on tidal water, it'd probably find one area and stick with it through all the tides. I never could figure out how to run those tides like those really good tide guys could do. So, good question. I'd like to go back to Potomac. I know the Potomac it kind of dropped off at times, but I heard it was coming back. I'd like to go back north, So, if you guys don't know, we are, what's the funniest things ever happened to me during a tournament? Mike asked, at Okeechobee one time, I was almost late to weigh in. My motor was overheating, so I went back to the back of the boat to knock the grass off of the bottom of the lower unit, and I slipped and fell headfirst in the water right before weighing. So I had to get in the boat, jump in, throw my life jacket on, and fly to weigh in. I was almost late. So I did make it in. I did make 10 grand in that tournament, so it was good, but I fell right headfirst in. So that's probably the funniest thing I've ever heard had happen to me. If you guys don't know, we're starting back on the FLW tour. The Tackle Warehouse FLW tour. We had 3 events earlier this year, and we went to Rayburn. We went to Lake Martin. I don't remember where we went in the middle one. But we've had 3 of them. We took the hiatus like everybody else. And with the COVID going on, we've got super tournaments coming back. So MLF and FLW have combined. We have 54 guys coming from MLF to fish with us on the FLW tour. Excuse me. So we start in June. We go to Chickamauga, which is going to be really cool. We're going to have 200 boats in that event. And then we go to La Crosse, Wisconsin. And then we go to Detroit, Michigan. And our championship is in Messina, New York. And so we've got a great schedule for the rest of the year. And so really looking forward to getting back at it. I know everybody's chomping at the bit to get started. And then we have these super tournaments to come back in with the MLF guys. So it's really going to be cool. I think they're going to pay $10,000 through 104th place in these. And so I would be looking for quite a bit of media stuff coming out on that. We're all pretty excited to get back to work. So, all right, cool guys. I'm going to make sure I didn't miss anything here. All right, guys. I appreciate everybody that, we had a few folks log on and listen tonight, and I appreciate the group of Fishers of Men. Man, what an awesome group. to have a devotional, to have tournaments on Saturday. I know it's a growing league. I know we've got one here in Northwest Arkansas now. I saw last week we've got one started up here, so it's really awesome what you guys are doing. I appreciate what you guys are doing. So you guys ever have any questions for me, you guys can always reach out to me on social media. I'll always try to respond to anything that I get, and I appreciate you guys having me on. Appreciate you listening. And when we coming back to Sportsman's, hey Dave, I don't know. I'd like to go back. That's a cool, really, really cool place. So if you guys got any more questions, you might shoot them up there. If not, we're going to wrap it up here in a minute, and I'm going to get in I think my wife is making some dessert right now, so I'm kind of looking forward to that dessert. I heard the oven ding a while ago, and so I think there's chocolate chip cookies fixing to come out of the oven. Okay. All right, Brady. He said if you see a little white ranger following me around Chickamauga, I'll just say hi. So you guys definitely, if you see me on the water, hey, don't be scared to talk to me. I always like to, when folks are following us around, I always like to talk to them. So, Danny, good being on here. I appreciate you guys inviting me and listening to me tonight. So, like I say, if you ever need anything from me, please reach out to me. And God bless you guys, and I hope everybody has a good night.